Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next one. Sorry. Where am I? Item 13. Robert's gonna underneath. Kia ora to both of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll take my report as read and we'll move through the presentation. So here today to discuss the Council's submission on the Local Government System Improvements Amendment Bill. In the presentation, we have outlined the amendments proposed under each area of reform in the bill and then presenting comments and recommendations of staff to be considered for inclusion in the submission. So on this slide, you can see the key reform areas that the amendments fall into. So refocusing the purpose of local government, requiring prioritisation of core services and council spending, making changes to measurement and reporting of council performance, introducing new transparency and accountability requirements, and revising certain regulatory requirements on councils. So under those first two areas, the changes to the purpose of local government would remove the four aspects of community wellbeing and introduce a focus on the cost-effective provision of good quality local infrastructure and public services. The changes to then reintroduce the definition of core services section, which would define the core services of local authorities as network infrastructure, public transport services, waste management, civil defence, emergency management, libraries, museums, reserves, and other recreational facilities. So this would effectively reverse the changes made in 2019 and return the purpose statement to the form it had from 2012 to 2019, with the addition of a reference to local economic development. And the core services section would essentially be the same as was in the Act during that period as well, with a couple of updates. One is changing solid waste collection and disposal to waste management, and the other one is changing the avoidance or mitigation of natural hazards to civil defence emergency management. So the staff recommendations, with regard to the proposed changes to the purpose of local government, staff recommend opposing the amendment and submitting in favour of retaining the existing purpose statement. That's consistent with submissions made by Council on that matter in 2012 and 2018, when previous changes were made to the Act. Matters that staff would include in the submission in support of retaining the existing purpose statement would include that the evidence that activities of local government has expanded when the four wellbeings are included in the purpose statement and that has led to higher rates increases is not strong. The regulatory impact statement for the bill acknowledges that the main driver of rates increases has been infrastructure costs, not expansion of council activities outside of core services. And it also notes that 2/3 of council capex spending is on core infrastructure, not including libraries and other community facilities or parks and reserves. The regulatory impact statement concludes that the proposed changes are unlikely to benefit communities more than the status quo. The submission would also include the points that the purpose statement needs to accurately describe the role of local government and its relationship with local communities, and that a narrowing of the purpose statement has the potential to shift local government away from holistic planning and placemaking that recognises connections between physical infrastructure, public services, and broader community wellbeing outcomes, and towards being a service provider only. Staff also recommend opposing the proposed list of core services. It is difficult to create a sufficiently comprehensive list of core services, although having the list of core services and the requirement to prioritise them doesn't prevent councils from undertaking activities other than those in the core services, the concern is that if it is paired with a rates capping system in the future, it will restrict the ability of councils to fund non-core activities. Creating a list of core services is also inconsistent with principles of localism, as it restricts the ability of councils to make decisions on what to prioritise, and it lacks flexibility, so future changes to the role of local government would require amendment to the list. We would also propose to include in the submission that if the core services statement does go ahead, that it includes an expansion of the definition of waste management to include waste minimisation functions, that council's regulatory functions should be included, and that the definitions of reserves and recreational facilities should be expanded to ensure that non-reserve council open spaces and community facilities are also captured. The proposed changes to performance measures and reporting would remove existing provisions from the Act, or some existing performance measure provisions from the Act, and move them into regulations. And the Secretary for Local Government would be given powers to create rules about performance measurement. A new requirement for councils to report on contractor and consultant expenditure would also be introduced. In the transparency and accountability area, the bill would give the Secretary the power to create standard codes of conduct and standing orders that would be binding on all councils. It would introduce a new responsibility for chief executives to facilitate information sharing with elected members, and 2 new principles would be added to the governance principles in the Act. One, to foster free exchange of information and expression of opinions by elected members, and the other to foster responsibility of elected members to work collaboratively to set direction of council. The main staff recommendation with regard to the performance measures and reporting proposal is to oppose the removal and weakening of consultation requirements within that part of the Act. So if the performance measurement activity areas are moved into regulations and the Secretary has the power to set them, we want to make sure that the consultation provisions are sufficiently strong that the Secretary consults over any new performance measures. Regarding the requirement to report on contractor and consultant expenditure, the main concern is that there's no clear definition of the terms contractor and consultant included, and that it is not clear why the provision is excluded from being reported on by the Auditor General. Regarding the standardisation of codes of conduct and standing orders, there's no policy rationale stated for making this change, and according to the regulatory impact statement, nor have alternative options been assessed. The staff view is that this change would unnecessarily remove decision-making power from local authorities and remove their ability to tailor their rules to suit local needs. We would suggest that if more standardisation is considered to be needed, that other options are considered, including setting minimum standards with room for local customisation, or having the Secretary approve local codes and assess them for compliance with minimum standards. Staff support the addition of the information sharing responsibility for chief executives, which is consistent with existing Auckland Council policy and common law provisions. We do suggest it could be helpful to define the scope of necessary for performance of duties, which is the standard for provision of information, or to specify any situations where information could reasonably be withheld. We recommend supporting the new governance principles. We consider that they are consistent with fostering an environment of robust debate. However, we do question how councils will be expected to fulfil the requirement to report on how the principles are being implemented. In terms of regulatory changes, the bill proposes to modernise public notice requirements. Councils will be able to meet public notice requirements by publishing notices online in a newspaper or in the New Zealand Gazette, where currently notices must be published both online and in a newspaper. The requirement to undertake 6 yearly service reviews would be repealed. The bill would clarify that acting or interim chief executives can sign certificates of compliance in relation to protected financing transactions, where the law currently states simply that chief executives have that right, making it unclear whether that extends to acting or interim chief executives. The bill would also extend the maximum length that a council can appoint a chief executive for a second term without advertising the vacancy from 2 to 5 years. The bill makes amendments to allow contributions to a project made by a third-party contributions to a project to count towards either or both of the growth share paid by development contributions or the rates share that funds renewals and level of service. Currently, third-party payments are counted against the total costs of the project, which reduces the ability to require development contributions on the project. And third-party contributions do include capital provided by the government through the Housing Acceleration Fund, Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, and National Land Transport Fund, for example. So if this change is enacted, third-party funders will be able to specify whether their funding should go to the growth share or the rates share. And if the funding is not going towards the growth share, it won't reduce the level of development contributions that can be charged for the project. Finally, the bill would remove the requirement for councils to consider the relevance of tikanga Māori knowledge when appointing CCO directors. So staff recommend supporting the changes to notice requirements. The requirement to place notices in newspapers is increasingly outdated. But one recommendation we have in relation to that provision is that there are other acts that include notice requirements and which are relevant to local government. There's a fairly long list, in fact, of those acts, and the bill doesn't propose to amend them. There's a suggestion that would be done later through an omnibus bill, but we suggest that we should submit that is done as a part of this bill rather than waiting. Staff recommend opposing the removal of the requirement for 6 yearly service reviews. The concern is that if the requirement to undertake regular reviews is removed, it could result in deferment of the reviews, which could lead to opportunities being missed. Those opportunities could include finding efficiencies and cost savings for ratepayers, or being able to consider alternative service providers, which could include, for example, Māori providers. We recommend supporting both amendments relating to chief executives. The clarification of the ability of acting or interim chief executives to sign certificates of compliance is a recognition of the practical reality that sometimes things will need to be done when the chief executive is not available. And giving the ability to reappoint a chief executive for a longer second term provides more flexibility to councils and allows them to retain a chief executive who has done a good job for a longer period. Staff recommend supporting the changes to the application of third-party contributions to projects where development contributions can be charged. That's a change that has been requested by local authorities in the past and is advantageous for councils. However, staff do feel that the drafting of the amendment can be improved in terms of clarity, and we propose to include some suggestions to that effect in the submission. Finally, staff are recommending opposing the removal of the requirement to consider the relevance of tikanga Māori when appointing CCO directors. Knowledge of tikanga Māori will often be relevant when appointing CCO directors, given the range of matters which CCOs make decisions on, and which are of interest to Māori, and given the treaty partnership obligations of local government, considering that that knowledge during the appointment process, or the relevance of that knowledge during the appointment process, makes sense as good practice. It should be noted that removal of the provision from the Act won't mean that local authorities can't consider knowledge of tikanga as part of their appointment process, and current Auckland Council policy does include provisions to that effect. Staff are also recommending that the submission includes a recommendation that if the provision is retained, there is a clarification added as to what stage of the appointment process knowledge of tikanga should be considered, as this has been a disputed issue in the past. And so finally the next steps are to prepare, once we've received the direction of the committee, to prepare the draft submission and circulate it to committee members, finalise the draft submission for the delegated committee members to approve, and just noting submissions close on the 27th of August. And I'm happy to take any questions, Mr Chair.
Thank you. So we're going to questions. Councillor Baker.
Ooh. So just in the in your presentation, you had one with the full well-beings, and I know that's probably one of the most politically charged parts of this whole thing. You talked about the evidence was not clear as to the expansion. I can't find anywhere any reference to that. And so what is the evidence and what do you base that on? And also, is there any evidence to the contrary that says that any change to the full well-beings is, there's evidence in regards to that? Because yeah.
I'm just finding the studies that are referenced, but yes, there have been several reviews that were carried out that are referred to in the regulatory impact statement during the period of time where the four well-beings were in place that found that there wasn't any particular expansion of those powers of the activities of local government as a result of the introduction of the four well-beings. Yes.
So it's somewhere there in the report, or is it somewhere else?
It isn't in the report, but we can provide that information to you.
Yeah, because I mean it's used as one of the reasons for saying no. We oppose the changes for the full well-beings, but it's one sentence that the evidence doesn't stack up, and I guess it's such a big thing.
Yes,
I think we should be, and I'm not trying not to do this in a critical way, Robert.
No.
I know it's such a big thing, but I would really, trying to make that decision, I'd love to see, old policeman in me. I like evidence.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And we certainly would obviously cite that in the submission. And I just found here the two that are cited in the regulatory impact statement as the 2006 report of the Central Local Government Funding Project Team and the 2007 Independent Inquiry into Rates.
Mayor Brown.
Okay, I would like to see, and I'll in fact ask why it's not there, but right at the start of any submission on stuff like this there, we need to say that we are a product of the LGACA, or whatever it's called, the Local Government Auckland Council Act, and we are not like the others. So it should be right at the start of the thing, because this is trying to shoehorn everybody back into the Local Government New Zealand Responsibility Act, where they can go into a room and yell at a few people and think they've done the lot. For instance, a standardised code of conduct. Well, the problems of Gore are not the problems of Auckland Council.
Thank God.
We are different. But so, and the very fact that a government whose standard of behaviour inside their own thing is appalling should have the temerity to tell us about standards of behaviour is a bit rich. And so we don't send people out of the room for poor behaviour, they all bugger off actually, but we need to actually produce our own. And I think we need to be saying that this is a third of New Zealand. We don't really need any of this actually. We'll decide what the well-beings for Aucklanders are. So I think right at the start it says that. There's the other thing, and by and large I'd follow along with what you've come up with mostly. But the whole point is that we are different, and that should be the thing right at the start. And the cheek of them to actually suggest that they're going to do something by the 27th of August about a third of New Zealand without bothering to come and talk to us is a good enough reason for opposing the whole bloody thing. Okay, so that should go right at the start. Where are you? How dare you come to Wellington and post a letter to us and say we've got to behave differently? It's insulting. I'm quite prepared to put in there that we'll form a group here for a code of conduct to improve their behaviour and send it down to them and see how they feel about it. Okay?
Robert will find a way to put that in the submission.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And certainly we will be making reference to LGACA and obviously the provisions such as the Auckland Plan provisions, which are in LGACA, which do refer to the four wellbeings as well. So we will certainly make those points, and thank you for that.
Good. Strongly.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much, and I agree kind of what everyone said so far, and I found it quite a broad thing. You know, one minute you're talking about the four well-beings, then you're talking about developer contributions, which is a black art as far as I can see anyway. I think I just want to give the feedback on behalf of the people I represent about the four well-beings. You know, I talk to people a lot, support, and the ones who don't or question it, the argument really goes that it's about that they're not kind of focusing on the four well-beings, they're focusing on the delivery of the core. And I heard you saying, how do you identify the core? Because you know what they're saying is, how do I feel good when the footpaths all higgledy-piggledy and I'm falling over? I go to the library and the same thing is the problem there. You know, the footpath's knackered. There's water coming down the drain and it's not cleaned properly, or it's not been diverted, or the curb is again in a bad condition and it's all coming down my driveway. So there's that clouded effort, there's that cloud between what's core and what makes you feel good. I just pass that on. If there's any way to sort of feed that in, I leave it up to you. Thanks.
Through the chair, thank you for that, Councillor Turner. I think one of the points to make is that the Act is attempting to impose a sort of a prioritisation on councils, and therefore implying that councils need to have that imposed on them, that they're not already prioritising those core services. And I think there's things that council already does in terms of our annual plan processes and things like that we can point to show that council already undertakes prioritisation processes. We don't fund things that are outside of what might be considered core services at the expense of the core services.
Good answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton.
On reflection, the answer to my question is probably in Hansard, so I will save it for a comment, please. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Williamson. Kia ora.
Yeah, just look, this is incredibly difficult because a lot of it's very political in terms of where you stand in terms of policy and who should be developing it and what should be the driving forces. I'm not going to spend at 6 o'clock at night, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time debating, because I disagree with a whole lot of this, and a whole lot of this is officials' view of the world and my view. I just want to get it clear. We're only going to get one chance to vote against some of this by just voting against the whole thing, right? We're not going to put up a smorgasbord of the various issues and get whether council laws agree with each one. We're just going to be able to say no to this whole thing because that's what I want to do. If it stays like it is, we're not going to get a chance of saying, well, this is not right. Or, I mean, the four well-beings alone is a half an hour contribution I could make about how all the analysis that I did when I was minister just showed it was beautiful wording and developed nothing of outcomes.
Yeah, it's probably hard for the staff to answer. I think the issue is timing again. So we've got a delegated on topics. I think it is, like you say, going to be too hard to go through every vote.
I get that.
Vote yes, no, but I mean, we'll see.
Well, as long as we just have a general vote, because I'm not going to vote for the whole thing, and we'll leave it at that.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, but if you'd like to talk about the things in your contribution that you might support.
I did not start talking about the things I want, or you'll still be here at midnight.
Okay.
I mean, come on, guys. It's only item 13 and it's 6 o'clock at night. I've been away at an AT board for a big chunk of the day and I don't know what you've been up to, but to be at item 13 at this time is amazing.
Yeah, we had a very important. The deed took some time and had.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not criticising it. I just want to know that we'll have a chance to record a vote against this at the end of it.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Councillor. Member Wilcox.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit on that subject. You know, this seems like a lot of corridor for very little outcome. How long have we had to prepare this submission?
About 2 weeks so far, so it's 4 weeks in total. Yeah.
Yeah, okay then. Number two then is, I think I want to just reiterate what I told the last presenter, is that Auckland, because this has that part there about Māori tikanga, and don't ask me what Māori tikanga is, I don't know what Māori tikanga is, I know what Ngāti Whātua tikanga is, I know what Ngāpuhi tikanga is, I don't know what Ngai Tahu tikanga is, I don't know what Samoan tikanga is, so, you know, this tikanga kaupapa is a bit of a weird and wonderful thing. But I think the issue I have is that actually, you know, like I said, Auckland is New Zealand's largest, it is the largest Māori city, and I think we need to make a point about that because they're talking about removal of Māori tikanga. And so I think, you know, we should make a point about that. Auckland is different, and my last question really comes to, with this kaupapa, does that mean then that the government won't be requiring us to do things like the Dogs Act or the gambling policies, or you know those, or the local alcohol policies, because they're all driven by central government and they all seem to be in those four well-beings kaupapa. I'm just asking, you know, does this mean that that's happened? I mean, it's all right to say don't do that, but then they pile it on through some regulation or some act and then say, well, council, you do this. I mean, in all the bylaws I've done, everyone has related to a government act, a central government act. So I'm just trying to understand, is there a quid pro quo in this court at all?
Kia ora, and through the chair, no is the answer to the question. So there's no reduction in those acts that councils are required to administer, but I think you certainly raise a valid point that we can incorporate in the submission as well, which is that another potential effect of the removal of the four well-beings is that it can undermine the government's own policy in terms of where they expect local government to deliver things.
Thank you, Member Wilcox. Yeah, I mean, even in the core services, animal management is not mentioned, which seems wild. There are no more questions, so just making sure I get the staff to step back. Thank you. I've moved this and Councillor Dalton has seconded. Councillor Dalton, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I would. It really feels like, well, I agree with the Mayor for a start. It feels to me like a whole lot of politicians got in a room and gave their feedback from their particular part of the country, from their council, or probably their ratepayers, actually, not their council, and then came up with this. It's like, it's a one-size-fits-all. And the Mayor's absolutely right. We are different, we are unique, but every council will also feel that way. This is just so far away from localism, it isn't funny. How there is this idea, because we've not had any evidence of it, that the four well-beings provide a rate decrease, or at least not a rate increase. I don't know where the evidence comes from. And Member Wilcox has given a really good example around the policies that we create from legislation. Everything is falling into what could be called a well-being. We have never, ever, ever agreed on what the well-beings are as a council because we all have a different view on it. There seems to be a view that there's some namby-pamby stuff going on and we're all around hugging each other. We're caring for our community in different ways. Even within Auckland Council, every local board will be doing things differently depending on the need of their local board. We have a role to be leaders for our city and for our people. If that means giving a damn, then we will give a damn. Because if we don't, central government won't be there. They're actually proving that at the moment. They are not there for the things that matter for our communities. So it is an important role for councils. And I just want to see the evidence and the data and the analysis that says that the 4 well-beings, whatever they are, once we've all decided on them, is costing us more. And I don't mean an annual rate increase. I mean on every other outcome that might either be picked up by central government once everything's fallen apart, or the unintended consequences that we then have to backfill by not doing what we have been doing. There is so much more to this than we can certainly talk about today, but even if we had the time to go through a thorough submission, we'd be here for ages doing that, to actually determine what it is we stand for our city. So I can't believe some of the things that are in the presentation that Robert just gave us. The fact that we're going back down, tikanga Māori again, is just appalling. So, gosh, I mean, I'd like to vote against it too if it weren't for the fact that we need to have a voice. We have to have a voice. We have to submit something. We might not all agree on that submission. But, yeah, I'd love to throw it back and say, you've got to be kidding. For a government that is right into people being in control of their own destiny, removing regulation and rules, go do it yourself. Look what they're doing to the councils. This is what you will do. And we're going to take this power off you and we're going to do that now. None of this makes sense. None of this makes sense. So, I don't know, I'll vote for a submission because it's better than being silent. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Chair. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. I mean, I dislike the Wellington edict and the standardisation, never like that. But equally, as we talk about that and we talk about I equally don't like the rigidity that is the 4 well-beings, because it seems like they're a sacred cow that we cannot review. And when we look at them, they are so broad in their meanings and so broad, that is where councils, in my view, get themselves unstuck, because we potentially take one of the well-beings and go flying out and saying it's one of the well-beings, it's associated to that. And I actually think we should be looking at the well-beings, but I think council should be able to have the ability to set what is important to them and not be stuck by a standardised set of well-beings that we all have just talked about and questioned about and constantly mentioned, as we don't like being told by Wellington, yet we're happy to have these rigid 4 well-beings. And so I would prefer us to see in our submission something about that we need to be, there needs to be work on well-beings that are relevant to councils individually. I am not a fan of the rigid ones because I think they get us in that much poop, and I could show you the emails that I have with people continually telling us, stick to your core. But we don't know, as you said, Angela, we don't know what our core services are because everyone has a different view, and that comes from the confusion that we have as we apply these well-beings. And so I think underlying, we need to do more work on that, and by just saying, no, we're not going to touch the well-beings, we will never look at them, and we will continue to have these very political, and they are, as Morris said, very, very political discussions. We just need to, at some stage, put our big boys and girls pants on and have a look at those 4 sacred cows, but in an open way.
Oh. Thank you. Just to make it clearer, I don't know if it's going to help or not help, but so we know what we're debating or voting on. I'm not going to put the 4 well-beings, but I think just putting essentially the submission will be in line with the positions in the presentation Pardon? So just, is that up? Yeah, so I'll just show you, and then it would be clearer, so then people know you're either voting against the positions the staff presented or for them, or, yeah, I don't know what the alternative, otherwise we've had this conversation before, we just don't put in a submission, but I don't think that's appropriate. So it would just essentially be what B was going to do anyway, delegate us to work on the positions that were presented, which included supporting the retention of the full wellbeing. So I guess that's the issue. Deputy Mayor, and then
Thanks, Chair. Look, I don't want to muck you around, and it is very late. I was going to suggest a chair's reg, because I think everyone's singing from the same song sheet here. Very nervous about a submission, but don't want to not do a submission because want to do a submission, you know. So I was going to suggest something that says something along the lines of, note in the interests of closer local government relations, Auckland Council would have preferred a discussion with central government prior to receiving the Local Government System Improvements Amendment Bill. You know, if you state that up, that's actually framing what we did say to staff. It's not their fault, but I think the Mayor's right, you know. Would it be nice to have a bit of a discussion because we are so different from the other councils. Councillor Dalton, I know that other councils think they're different as well, but we're really different. We're really different by legislation. So I was kind of just going to front foot that. I think everyone hopefully would agree that we're just making the point, you know, we want to work with the government, whoever they are, but it would have been nice to have a conversation first.
did you have some words to add?
Yeah.
Yep.
In the gap, I'm going to talk. I think it's a cheek that we're even having to submit on a local government system improvements amendment bill that doesn't start by recognising this is a third of New Zealand. And so I would suggest that our submission should be we oppose this until you come and talk to us.
Well,
We are completely different.
that's another option.
And so I just think it's a cheek that this even exists.
I was being a bit more polite.
So I think
Won't
I think
work.
we might. I think it might be, even though it's 1:00,000, I think it might be a good minute, even though we're in debate, to take 5 minutes, have a look at these, the discussion happening here. I know it's not going to please everyone, but I think if we get a couple of resolutions.
Chair, can I just ask, because I want to find out whether, I know that's your Chair's recommendation. I want to find out what Councillor Simpson has said, whether that's going to be an amendment. I know it hasn't been, from what I'm looking at, been moved and seconded, or has it?
The main resolution is,
Yeah.
I think Councillor Deputy Mayor wanted to add something about our dissatisfaction of no contact pre this.
So if it has been moved and seconded, it's whether Councillor Simpson's suggestion is going to be confirmed by the mover and the seconder.
Yeah, I think
And
when we
I
see
think
the-
I just want to know that process and what's
When
going to
we see-
happen,
when we-
or if it's an amendment.
when we see
That's
the
all.
wording, I'm pretty sure Councillor Dalton and I, well, I won't speak for Councillor Dalton,
Okay.
but
Well,
I
then
feel,
maybe that 5 minutes.
yeah, so,
Apologies, councillor, you're right. I didn't follow due process. I was just trying to
Yeah,
fast track this and
That's
make
all,
it right.
because I only heard what you've said, but I haven't seen the written amendment or inclusion with the okay from the chair and deputy chair. If that's the case, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure then we can debate on all of the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
but also that, let's have a 5 minute break, go for a bathroom.
The mayor that actually cuts straight to the chase and doesn't need all that.